Aleksandra Korolova is a wise, I don't know how to say it, Gabelin Assistant Professor of Computer Science at USC. Her research interests are in the societal implications of computation, responsible algorithms, and AI, and tech policy. She's developed really novel approaches for auditing black box socio-technical systems. She's helped develop and deploy algorithms that make personal data-driven innovation possible while respecting societal values, including privacy and fairness. And she is moving to a new institutional home, I believe tomorrow, at Princeton, where she'll hold a joint position between computer science and the School of Public and International Affairs, which I think really reflects her kind of abiding interest in how laws on privacy and non-discrimination should be interpreted and enforced in computational terms, and how that might inform law and be informed by law. And so I'm delighted to turn the stage over to Aleksandra.
Thanks, Deidre, for this wonderful introduction, and thanks so much for inviting me. And I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person. I'm going to talk today about auditing of social media algorithms. And as a computer scientist, I would, my original thing is to develop algorithms. And in the last 10 years, I really started focusing on what role do these algorithms play in shaping opportunities for individuals and in shaping communication. And in my ideal world, I would really love to be able to study social media algorithms, to be able to understand how the news feeds shape our communications. But that's a really hard task. So what I'm going to talk about today is a slightly simpler task of studying just the algorithms of ad delivery, with the hope that they're a little bit easier to study because we can have a little bit more access to them through the advertising interfaces that the platforms offer, but also with the hope that it's the same algorithms that drive news feeds, recommendations, and ad delivery. So if we can uncover challenges with ad delivery algorithms, then we can hypothesize that similar challenges may exist with other types of algorithms in the social media. And another reason to study ad delivery algorithms, besides the fact that this is something we can study, is that there's perhaps a counter incentive for the ad platforms to self-police those algorithms because of potential conflicts between societal interests and platforms' business interests. So so my plan for today is to give you some examples of our prior work from auditing ad delivery, showing how even the simplest algorithms you would think of are actually not so easy to interpret and understand. And then based on these examples, move to a discussion of how could we maybe achieve more accountability for these algorithms, and finish with a concrete proposal that we call platform-supported auditing. So let me first briefly say what I mean by the ad delivery algorithms. And really, advertising is a two-phase process. There's the advertiser themselves who decides which audience they want to target, which ad creative they want to show, what budget they want to use. And then there's the platform that actually decides who is going to see these ads. It's not every person in the advertiser's target audience that sees the ad. The platform decides that. And the platform runs an auction where it bids on the advertiser's behalf, and then it determines the price to charge, and the winner of that auction gets to show their ad to the consumer. And I just want to agree off the bat that this algorithm is a prime candidate for something that we may want to understand, because it's not a straightforward thing. I pay more, my ads get shown. There's a lot of competing objectives that the platform may be balancing when they're running this kind of auction. There is the bid and the budget of the advertiser, but there's also something platforms call relevance of an ad to a person. So platforms want the ads to be relevant to people, whatever that means. And then there's also the overall platform's business interest. You can think about it as a long-term business interest of keeping both advertisers and users happy and the investors happy. And given that this balancing of many objectives, it has been hypothesized for many years, actually dating back to Latanya Sweeney in 2013, that these algorithms may play a non-trivial role and may be creating discrimination. What do we know about these algorithms? Actually, we know surprisingly little. What somebody like a platform like Facebook says is that the ad that wins an auction and gets shown is the one with the highest total value, which is a combination of three major factors: bid, estimated action rates, ad quality, and relevance. All of these, the bid, the estimated action rate, the ad quality, and relevance, in today's world are controlled by Facebook's opaque machine learning algorithms. So really, we know nothing about the auction except this high level view of there are three machine learning algorithms that are impacting who gets to show the ad. And let me show you how this actually plays out in a concrete scenario. So suppose I want to understand whether job ad delivery is discriminatory. And this is relevant in US law, and in general, this is relevant for societal impacts of ad delivery. And say I'm an advertiser and I run a job ad without gender specification for a software engineer. And say I notice that after running this ad, it mostly results in applications from white men. What can I say about this? Well, I can go back to my ad creative and see, is my picture only depicting white men? And maybe that's why only white men are applying. But say my ad creative has a representative sample of people and tries to be as inclusive as possible. Then there are still other reasons that this may be happening, right? It could be that if I'm running my ad on Facebook and there's just more men who use Facebook, and therefore my ad goes to more men and more men apply. It could be that the competition for women is much higher on the platform. There are just many more advertisers who are trying to reach women than men. And so perhaps my ad is losing in this auction due to market forces, as you will. Or it could be that the ad is being shown both to men and women equally, but only the men are engaging with it for some reason. And you can ask the same for the question about race. Is the race of respondents driven by differences in platform use, differences in cost, or differences in engagement? Or it could be neither of these. It could be that the ad delivery algorithm, so the platform that is deciding, that is looking at this relevance, is explicitly favoring white men. And that even though I'm running the ad without gender specification, actually the ad is only really being shown to white men. And that's why I'm only getting applications from white men. And to kind of disentangle all of this is non-trivial, and perhaps not surprisingly, but definitely regretfully, platforms themselves like Facebook are not being forthcoming in helping to disentangle these potential causes. So what we did with colleagues at Northeastern and Upturn is try to control for all these possible variables and to disentangle them. And the way we do it is we become an advertiser on Facebook and act like a real advertiser. And we simultaneously run multiple ad campaigns with creatives designed in a particular way, so that we can control for the various factors that could be obscuring the role of the ad delivery algorithm. And just like a real advertiser, we receive campaign performance reports. So the number of impressions and clicks that our ads received, broken down by age, gender, and location, which turns out to be enough to control for certain variables. And I won't go into the specifics of how we control for everything, but let me give you just like one final example here to say we have two ads running simultaneously, targeting a gender and race balanced audience with the same budget, from the same page, with the same credit card, everything's the same. The only difference in the ads themselves is what are they advertising. One ad is advertising a job in the lumber industry, and another ad is advertising a job in cleaning. And what we observe, so this simultaneous run allows us to control for the many other confounding variables like differences in costs and differences in usage. And what we observe is that the lumberjack job ad is delivered mostly to a male white audience, and cleaning ad is developed mostly to a female and Black audience, even though we are targeting the audiences that are exactly the same. So one would hope that at this point one could say, well, this is definitely discrimination that's attributable to the algorithm. There's really a problem here. We need to look into the algorithm more. But actually, there's another possible explanation. And another possible explanation for seeing these results is that perhaps that Facebook's algorithm is so smart that it's able to figure out that actually there are many more white males who are qualified for the lumberjack job in our audience than for a cleaning job. And so they are just showing the ad only to people who have the qualifications for this job. And that's what's leading to this skew. And if that's the case, actually qualifications is an excusable source of skew per US law. So if it's really qualifications that are explaining this result, then these algorithms are not harmful. So we need another tool to control for qualifications. And in work with my colleagues at USC, we came up with this other tool, and we said, well, let's look at ads that have similar at companies where jobs have similar qualification requirements, but there is a de facto gender skew in the real world. So for example, Domino drivers and Instacart drivers have the same requirements. They need to have a driver's license and be able to carry some stuff. But it just happens that in the world, Dominas drivers are mostly male and Instacart drivers are mostly female. So if we find two jobs like that, we can run the ads for these positions at the same time, targeting the same audience. And then if there's a relative difference in delivery by gender of these ads, then we can rule out qualification as a cause of skew. And we did that on two platforms. We did that on Facebook and we did that on LinkedIn. And we actually found that Facebook reproduces the real world skew in its ad delivery. So the Instacart ad goes to many more women than the Domino's ad, whereas LinkedIn does not. And we tried this also for other job types. So for software engineers, turns out Netflix has more software engineers than NVIDIA. So we can run the software engineering ad for Netflix jobs versus an NVIDIA job. And again, Facebook delivers the Netflix ad to more women than the NVIDIA job ad. So now we can really rule out qualifications as the source of skew. And we can say, well, this job ad delivery algorithm really is discriminatory. But it took us a while, right? From the original hypothesis in 2013, followed by work in 2015. It took us, 5 years, right, to actually get this evidence through our external audits. And we can ask now similar questions for, let's say, political ad delivery. We can ask, well, is political ad delivery echo chamber-like? And again, we have to design these controlled experiments controlling for different things in order to disambiguate between the role of people's engagement versus the role of the algorithm itself. And we did that, and we found that yes, Facebook does steer its ads to its political ads towards users who already agree with the candidate's message, even when the candidate is running ads to a balanced audience. And it also charges more to reach users who don't already share the campaign's views. So where does that leave us? Well, on one hand, we did find ways to show that ad delivery on Facebook is discriminatory by gender, and that Facebook non-transparently puts its thumb on a scale of distribution of political messaging. On the other hand, our approach took time. It was creativity intensive. It was expensive. It actually, I didn't talk about this, but it did require rich data sources containing private information in order to run our experiments. And it only really applies to advertising content and advertising algorithms where we have this additional hook of we get campaign performance reports. So what should be done, right? How can there be more accountability, broadly speaking, for social media algorithms? Should platforms do more? Can they offer more transparency, and should they support auditing? And it looks like legislation, at least, is definitely moving into the direction of yes, the platforms should do more. So, and should be mandated to do more. So in the US, there's a proposal called Platform Transparency and Accountability Act, In the EU, there's a proposal called Digital Services Act that was actually adopted and will go into force in 2015, I believe, both of which mandate regular audits by vetted researchers. But a question that they leave open is how to do these audits in a way that can protect users' privacy, and also that can protect platforms' business interests and trade secrets, which really goes back to the challenges that Rebecca was talking about in her talk earlier today. And the platform's response to any sort of calls for auditing or any reports that say, well, we need to know more about your algorithms because your algorithms are so important to shaping society, are also the same. They're saying, look, we need to protect user privacy, and we don't want to collect demographic attributes such as race and gender in order to study whether our algorithms are discriminatory by race and gender. And in general, our algorithms are based on users' private data. We can't just reveal their outputs to anyone. And it's our secret sauce, so there's the business interests that have to be protected. And so the company's current approach at best is to do internal impact self-assessments, and to also sometimes invite auditors who the platforms select, who then audit their algorithms under NDAs. For example, in the settlement that Meta just reached in the housing ad discrimination case, where there's going to be an auditor that will check whether their proposed changes satisfy the terms of the settlement, the auditor will first be selected by Meta and will be bound by significant NDAs. So what can we do given this? And now I'm going to put on my hat as a computer scientist, and I will say, well, actually, privacy and secrecy and business interests are things that we know how to protect formally, scientifically, and let us propose a method for doing that we're going to call platform-supported auditing. And the method we're proposing just applies to social media algorithms. And it's actually going to need real platform support. So platforms will have to cooperate with the auditors in order to achieve the goals. But I think if we do have this real platform support, then at least in a certain context, we can do meaningful auditing while preserving privacy and while preserving trade secrets and company business interests. And the core thing to auditing social media algorithms will be really to focus on auditing the relevance algorithms. And what I mean by relevance algorithms is like an umbrella term where algorithms are really used to decide what is relevant to a user. And this is used to both prioritize organic content and promoted content. It determines the selection and order of organic content on the timeline. And as we saw, it is used in the ad auction as a modifier to bids and other aspects to determine which ad wins the auction. So now we're going to focus purely on the relevance algorithms. And here's our framework. Let me go through it really quickly. So the first step is the auditor is going to select and upload a trial content and an audience. So it would really be interested in how does the platform treat this particular content for this particular audience. And both the content and the audience are going to depend on the actual harm being studied. So, for example, if we are studying gender bias in STEM job ad delivery, then the trial content may be a job ad, and the audience may be comprised of both men and women. In the second step, the platform is going to calculate the relevance scores for each user in that uploaded audience for that uploaded content piece. In the third step, the platform is going to add noise to the relevance scores that it computed to protect privacy. What does it mean to add noise? Well, I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm going to say that they're going to add noise in order to satisfy the guarantees of differential privacy, which is a definition that limits the harm that each individual's participation can have to their privacy. And by adding this noise to the relevance scores, it's going to both protect the private information about individuals from the auditor, and it's also going to protect the platform's business interest, because now in the next step, what they're going to be revealing is not the original data they're computing on. It's not going to be the code of the algorithm. It's just going to be the noisy relevance scores. And then in this fourth step, the auditor is going to reveal receive the noisy relevance scores from the platform, and it's going to apply the fairness metric or whatever metric that is relevant to the societal use case that they're studying in order to see whether the algorithm satisfies it. So that's the platform-supported auditing framework at a glance for the relevance algorithms. And there is, no proposal is perfect, and this proposal has a lot of assumptions, and including on cooperation, but it does address some of the challenges posed by current limitations of auditing. And what we can show is that this doesn't have, at least for the use case of studying bias in job ad delivery, this does not have a tremendous cost. So informally speaking, adding privacy and adding this extra layer of protection only imposes a small constant factor on the number of people one would need to study in order to measure whether the ad delivery algorithm satisfies equality of opportunity. So really, yes, privacy, protecting privacy and business interests is a barrier, but it can be overcome, and there is some new trade-offs that we can look at in the space of auditing, in how they can be overcome. So this is our proposed solution to instantiate the PADA Act and the Digital Services Act, and at least in the domain of relevance algorithms for social media platforms. But this is, of course, only the beginning, and there's many open questions of who should be allowed to audit, and how frequently, how the results should be published, and also how this can apply to other types of fairness definitions besides equality of opportunity. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions now or during the panel to follow.
Terrific. Thank you, Aleksandra. Ben or Zach, do you want to stop sharing your screen, Alex? And Ben or Zach, are there questions in the room?
Yeah, we have
Thank you for the talk. It was really good. It was really good. I was wondering, like, with these audit studies, how, like, I think right now it seems kind of plausible to do these audit studies along axes that we've identified a priori, let's say like gender or race in some of these cases. But how difficult do you think it is to actually discover new sources of discrimination from these audits? Like, what are the methodological challenges both in designing these audit studies as well as the kind of information you get from the companies in, like, let's say discovering that like the lumber supply ad was like being shown more to people from like some political party in like, you know, some specific part of the US. Yeah, just curious about that.
Thanks. That's a really good question. I think even studying discrimination for the predetermined things like gender and race is incredibly difficult. That's why, you know, each of these discoveries takes years of graduate student research time. To expand it to things we don't know without platforms' help and without new tools, I don't think is possible. So either we need platforms' help or we need radically new tools like massive crowdsourced audits, like the kind of what the markup is trying to do, or we need perhaps advertiser cooperation in mass to help us study this, but it's incredibly difficult to do.
Great. Alex, I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to ask Rebecca and Alice to come back in, and I'm going to ask the people controlling the display if we can move to gallery so we have everybody's faces up there. My narrow question was just about whether or not the qualification skew differences that you saw between Facebook